LinkedIn. I would like to think that I'm one take Gary Goldsmith, but I'm working with Dominic Waters today. This hasn't gone well so far. He's incredibly bright. Congratulations, LinkedIn. We're nearly there. We're nearly through this. It's most people going back to work, but as we do, all eyes are focusing on our staff and are they the right people to take us to the next level? Things are changing out there. I don't want to sound callous about it, but potentially the people who took us all the way to where our business is today may not be the people who take us on their journey going forward. So I've got an expert in the room. Today I'm with my good friend, started as a supplier to the group, started bringing vodka in and making us do a quiz every time he did a presentation to the group. So obviously we became really good friends. He's been on ski trips with us. He comes to Ibiza with us. He's very, very clever. I'm never allowed to say that he's an Etonian. There, I've done it again. His hair's ridiculous today. So I'd like to introduce everybody to my good friend, Dominic Waters from Paul Waters Associates. Say hi, Paul.
Hello.
So I've got 5 questions to ask Dom, but maybe it's better for you, Dom, to tell us a little bit about your background and why it is that we would come to you to talk about people, skills, behaviours, and all the science around that.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, just a bit of history. We're a family business. My dad, Paul, started the business back in the 70s from being in sales all his life, sales training business, was doing some work for British Airways, actually, in the early 90s with their corporate sales teams. Heard about this psychometric tool that BA were having a look at and that American Airlines were using with a lot of success, and Qantas too. Checked it out in detail, went out to the States. That didn't put him off, even though it was a psychometric in Dallas, in Texas, but came back convinced enough that actually this really helped understand what makes salespeople tick better. So we got involved in it, as simple as that. Took over the license in the UK, which ironically was being held on to, but nothing being done with by a recruitment business, Hudson. And since then, we've been working with all sorts of sales organisations in all sorts of sectors. That's the interesting thing, seeing how salespeople and cultures vary across sectors. Your sector, we started working with about 15 years ago when I joined the business. I had a sales background as well, but decided to come and join the old man. And what is very interesting about your sector is it's much more fast-paced than the others that we work in, and we can bear that up with the objective measurements we've taken. But it's a tougher sales job as well, so it makes life tricky for RDLs to pick the right people. Yeah,
but you know my opinion about psychedelics, right? So I've never been a fan of them. You've got your disc, you've got your Thomas International. I think they're all just, they're a better motive. It depends on your mood when you're doing them. You can get multiple different outcomes. However, yours, I will say, is saving us tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. It is always ridiculously accurate. There's a human element as well. So you collect the data, then you help summarize it for people. Why do you think you're having so much more success than anything else in this market we've ever looked at?
Well, we can't really take any credit for it. It's the research behind it. The guys in the States who've done the research, and what they found, they were looking at salespeople from the 70s onwards, and they found that personality, which is what most psychometrics measure, and that can be useful for a lot of scenarios and a lot of things you want to pick up. Actually measuring, trying to predict whether somebody's going to sell, it doesn't really pick it up. So this one very much focuses on people's preferences around selling, the amount of drive, energy, and comfort and commitment that they're likely to bring to the job. And what we see, it's the old story, Gary, the people who are successful in sales roles, they're not 2 or 3 times more intelligent than anyone else. They don't necessarily know the market or have been doing it for a number of years. Well, there are some exceptions, but, it's not a prerequisite. And what we find is the people who do the most activity and who crack on and have the most conversations with the most people tend to get the best results. It's simple as that. And that's what we're trying to pick up.
and bravery, and how much effort it's going to be worth for that rate of return, and that's what I think pulls out. So I've got 4 questions for you. Then potentially we give people a little sneaky peek of the product, if that's all right. So first things at the moment, and stuff that we talk about on skiing trips. What's changed over the last couple of years? So in terms of looking at the candidate input, give us a clue what you're noticing.
Yeah, well, the great thing is, because this is an objective tool, we can pick up trends, and we're seeing things do change from generation to generation. We're certainly seeing in the younger generation, while there are some, I don't know what they are now. Are they Y or Z or gone around the alphabet? I don't know what they are now.
So they're probably pissed and hoping not to go back to work first.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we are picking. The past couple of years, we've really noticed certain scales that we measure. For example, there's a scale that measures whether somebody's likely to stick at a job, or whether it's more of a sort of instant gratification. If they're not, earning 200K within a couple of months, they lose interest and they're off to the next thing. And that might not be another recruitment job. We're seeing that score, that lack of stickability, get worse. We're also seeing, interestingly, telephobia, the fear of the phone. There's a lot of noise around at the moment. I'm not sure if I very much doubt you would agree with it, about, the telephone is dead as a tool. That's bollocks as far as we've seen. The telephone is a vital tool, but what you've got is a generation coming through who spend a lot of time on their phones, but not actually talking on it. And we've seen that level of comfort over the past couple of years drop quite significantly. And that's something you've really got to pick up in people, because if they ain't going to make phone calls in a recruitment job, you've got trouble ahead.
It's really interesting. I spoke to Sean Wadsworth about this from Nudge Frank once upon a time, and he was explaining that the way kids date these days is they DM each other. Back in our days, we used to go and wait outside the phone box and spend 10p, and then you've got 10p to try and convince someone to go out with you, right? Versus you can DM infinitely. So we learned those skills, life skills, very young. If you're in your 20s and it's something you've not been doing, it's kind of hard to learn that skill. So things like bravery, have you seen any changes in people's, people, I always like people with chips on both shoulders, very well balanced, but they had things to prove to people. Have you seen any change of people's attitude towards giving things a go?
Yeah, we're seeing it get worse. As simple as that. We pick up the main measurement that the SPQ test picks up is motivation, and that measures drive and resilience. So regardless of how high your fears are, your hurdles, how fast are you running at them? What's your bravery? You're going to give it a go, try and jump it. We're seeing those levels drop off. I mean, I don't want to slag off this current generation, because there's some other scores we're seeing that get better. They are actually more confident about being assertive, for example. But that overall level of sort of energy that they throw at stuff, that bravery, going through the whole packet of 10p's. Did you go through quite a bit of change before you had any success?
No,
or did you have a good hit rate?
I was a good-looking boy, and I worked on my lyrics pretty hard before I took every phone call. So yeah, and always say if you get a chance to work on mum before you speak to the girl, then you're in. All right, which is interesting. So what trends are you seeing right here, right now? Because things are going to change, aren't they? So, are the kids who helped us get where we are they going to be the ones that are going to help us fight through this time, maximize the bounce? But, you've got to be quite resilient. You're going to have to kiss more frogs to get a piece of business right now.
Yeah. And as ever, what's difficult is trying to pick it up on face value or on Zoom value, as it is these days, because, people are well briefed. They know how to put forward a good impression. They're on best behaviour when you're looking at them initially. It's what they're actually going to do once they're in the job. No one picks their nose on first date, but you'll find out pretty quickly whether they do, and then it will be too late. So yeah, we are seeing, it's interesting at the moment, we're seeing some really good opportunities for RBLs to pick up good people who, through no fault of their own, have ended up in a bad situation through COVID. What we're also seeing is people who look equally good on face value are the desperate ones who actually, there's a reason why they're in trouble at the moment. And actually, despite what they're saying, they're not going to commit properly to the job. So we're seeing some real variance in SPQ results. So, you know, great opportunity, but great risk as well.
And how are things going to change post-COVID, do you think?
Well, you know, there's a lot that's going to change, isn't there? But I think what is pretty certain from a sales point of view is that people who potentially have got away with a bit of low-hanging fruit in the past, being a bit passive, that's going to change. And it's going to be more important than ever that people are comfortable about getting out there and looking for new opportunities. And what we see often, especially when experienced people move from one company to another, you'd think on paper, well, you know, why wouldn't they perform? They've got the industry knowledge and so on. But actually, what you're asking them to do is something different. You're asking them to grow new business. And that's the bit that people can struggle with.
And something else which is going to be a new dynamic is potentially this work from home. So given your knowledge of your test, if we're going to ask people to be a little bit more self-reliant, to work from home, to have that mental capacity to drive, you know, on their own, which can be quite lonely. Are you thinking about how you're going to balance that new dynamic with the reports in your test?
Yeah, very much so. The beauty of the test is that there's a constant scientific way of measuring stuff, but what the results mean depend very much on the context of the situation. So every time we do a report for someone, we personalize it. We take into account where they're coming from, the situation they're going into, and what you need them to do. So, for example, someone working from home, there's a key measurement called goal level that we measure, and that's how clear you are about being able to set your own goals, stick to them, basically to be able to be independent enough to work autonomously, easy for me to say. And that scale, so for example, in that situation, if there's a problem with that scale, we'd be flagging that up big time as a concern. But I agree with you, you know, things are going to change, and depending on the different jobs people will do, we need to make sure that we're pointing out certain areas that are potential concerns, or certainly development areas if you do take them on.
And there's one thing, obviously, that I used to have a pathological hate of RBLs, R2Rs, right? Because the rec to recs make it very difficult for us as recruitment business leaders. There's so many people knocking on the doors of recruiters saying, come over here, we'll give you an extra 10 grand. Versus the recruitment business leader saying you have to hit this target to earn that 10 grand. So it was just very easy for people to job hop. That's going to go away. You know, there aren't going to be those opportunities for people to bounce around, and you're going to have to show more loyalty and more stickability. Would that be shown out in your tests?
Yeah, I mean, well, again, the same rules apply though, regardless of the situation around them. If somebody hasn't got that underlying stickability, then you've potentially got a problem. It might be less tempting or less easy for them to look elsewhere, but actually you still need them to focus on the job. So it's a big thing. We did an exercise a few years ago with a big recruitment business, and we had a whole bunch of people who'd left, and they actually had decent SPQ profiles, and we were scratching our heads a bit. Then we looked at this goal diffusion score, this stickability score, and they all had good career paths. There was plenty of opportunity left there for the business, but they just didn't have that staying power, and they buggered off somewhere else, and the business hadn't got their investment back on them. So you do have to be careful.
I know. And can we talk about the CSI product?
Yeah, now this CSI product, I've spent the years on SPQ, and about a year ago now, the CSI product was introduced, and it's a sister tool to SPQ. It just looks not at the sales piece. It looks at how generally people are going to operate in the work style, what their preferences are in the workplace, how they deal with stress, whether they like development, how they tend to socialize with other people. And thanks to you, Gary and Dean, we've been doing some analysis, with the pirate RBLs, the business leaders, and that's really interesting actually. Excuse me. Dave's shown some real trends. The particular scales that we pick up, the level of urgency, which is a key one we measure, how fast-paced you are, how quick you are with the decision making. It's off the scale for RBLs. We haven't seen anything like it anywhere else. What's interesting is within the pirates, there's also a scale that measures whether people are light-hearted and humorous at work, and that's the environment they prefer to work in. Funnily enough, you're quite high on that. Who would have thought?
Dab. 55-year-old dad. And obviously, we've got a problem with the team showing the screens, but we'll be able to do this after. Do you want to give people just an indication of, how easy it is to read one of these reports? Let's do your plug for the business. Because again, I will say to people, you've saved, it's got to be hundreds of thousands of pounds, because every time you get a hire wrong, according to Glassdoor, it's 4 times basic. So it pushes you back. And, a key hire within a business could be a coin toss. So do your plug for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, the great thing about the CSI is it just gives you a much clearer idea about how someone will tick. It really gives you, it's just like doing an ultra interview with them. You can really get down to the nitty gritty about what they like, what they don't like, and you can pick up particular areas that measure whether they like being developed, whether they are comfortable in team environments, or whether they're a bit more independent, whether they're actually quite needy and will need a lot of praise. And that sounds silly, but it's amazing how quickly somebody can be demotivated if they're like that and they don't get their daily hug. Whereas other people are the opposite. Sometimes you actually need to give them a bit of distance, otherwise you're going to piss them off. So what we're trying to do with this tool is give you a much better idea as, first of all, whether somebody's going to fit in the organisation, but secondly, when you've got them, how you can get the best out of them, because people are so different. I mean, if that's the one thing I've learned with all this testing that we do, people are so different. We all work differently. And the more you can understand that about the people, the more you're going to get out of them. It's as simple as that.
Brilliant. But it's always a pleasure to see you. I love your pictures of Monaco in the background. I've always been really nosy about people's houses, so that's really quite cool. I've got a little personal message from Lula. So for those that don't know,
Lula.
My daughter is going to study psychology. So Dominic and his wife gave her some time to talk about psychedelics and the psychology and the therapy side of it. So she knew I was speaking to you today. So she sends love, which is brilliant. She's a star.
She got her mother's looks, fortunately, but send her my love.
Well, I won't now, dickhead. Right. So for everybody on LinkedIn, you need to work with this guy. He's brilliant, and just look at what the product does. But more importantly, my takeaways from that: resilience. You need people who are going to be brave as hell and be willing to pick up the phone. They need to be self-started. You can't be pandering to everybody at the moment, and they've got to be gains, not drains. So find a way, even if you don't use Dominic's tool, find a way to use some science behind your hiring strategy. And even you should, if you've been spending so much time investigating your ROI and everything on your P&L, spend the same amount of time to look at your people. Otherwise, you might be flogging a dead horse in this marketplace. And, you want to maximize the bounce. You want to make sure we're there. Dominic, thank you. Thank you, Linking. Keep smashing it, and we see you the other side. Cheers all.
Cheers, Gary.